David Sumner
to go,
just
Mayor
called
Panko.
me to borrow a radon meter,
Oh, good.
so now I get to meet him.
We're good?
Small
I
town,
do
but-
have my radio on in case I need to jet.
Okay.
That's no problem.
You'll slowly try and work your way to the chair. Get moving like an emergency. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of Smith Falls for All Committee on December 14th, 2023. I'll open the meeting with land acknowledgement. On December 14th, 2023, we acknowledge that sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. The land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the River Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We're mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building for peace and friendship, and being mindful of generations to come. Call the meeting to order at 9:02 a.m. Ask for a motion for approval of the agenda. Moved by Nicole and seconded by Katie. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Adoption of minutes. We'll have a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting. Moved by Peter, seconded by Janet. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Ask for disclosure of monetary interest. Seeing none, we're very fortunate to have two delegations today. Now, we don't have Andrew, we have John here from Planet Youth Lanark County, so turn the floor over. We'd love to hear the updates from Planet Youth.
Okay, I'm just going to back up so I can see the screens.
If people want to see the big screen, they can sit out here.
Yes. Yeah, if anyone wants to move to.
We also have a little screen on the side here.
I hope nobody minds me standing.
No.
No,
Actually, maybe the podium, would that work for you?
no, that's okay. I'm much more comfortable pacing.
Okay, so long as we can pick it up, the audio picks it up, right?
Yep, we should be good.
Okay, yeah, okay.
First of all, thank you very much. David Soffy will be joining me shortly. He's
On your footsteps now.
maybe him now. We met virtually in the spring, late spring, early summer, and we promised at that point that we'd come back and give you an update on what Planet Youth had been doing over the summer. I'd like to start maybe just doing a brief background on Planet Youth. We'll skim through it fairly quickly. Council's had a chance to see it online, but I'll just cover a couple of salient points. And a little bit about what Planet Youth is, why are we here? Karen, thanks. It's basically a process that was developed in Iceland that moves away from the traditional, if it's harmful for you, don't do it, which was the way we would approach kids using substances. And it's more of a development of a collaborative environment in which not only the kids, but the community and the parents become involved in trying to deal with community shifts, attitude shifts around the use of substance abuse and connecting youth to the community that they're living in and in reverse. Thanks, Gary. Go to the next. When Andrew delivered this the last time, he pointed out there's 4 domains that are really critical: the family, the extracurricular activities, the peer group, and the schools. And the child that intersects with all of those at some point, at different times in the day, different degrees during the week. But those 4 domains have to be part of this community collaborative if there's going to be success in doing it. Carrie? There are 5 basic principles. Apply a primary prevention approach, engage and empower community members, emphasize community action, embrace public schools, especially as a natural hub for this collaborative effort, integrate researchers, policymakers, practitioners, community members, so that everybody's working with the same kind of information. We tend to be in silos, and silos means that information doesn't flow. Key is to get information flowing amongst the members of the collaborative towards goals that are specific to maybe your community or somebody in a particular school, so that they can be focused on a particular environment, but there are some basic principles that need to be looked at. match the scope of the solution with the scope of the problem. And that's, again, going back to what I just said in terms of Smith Falls may have something that nuances with the issues that they're dealing with, the police are dealing with, the schools dealing with. It's different from Perth or from Lanark, but the basic concept of working together and keeping information flowing takes place. These are just the 10 steps that the Planet Youth concept runs through. We are now, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, we've moved right through to the point where we're prepping now for step 10, which is doing our next survey, which will happen in the spring or early summer of next year. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Thanks, Gary. This is specific to Smith Falls. The information is not that significantly different from other communities, other schools. But there were two pieces that we talked about in the spring. One is the survey from 2022. One of the key takeaways from what the kids were saying was this question of feeling safety at school or comfortable at school. Next screen, please. And the second was there was a very obvious bit of information that says kids aren't getting a whole lot of sleep, or most kids are not getting the kind of sleep that they need. And
This is specific to Smith Falls schools.
this particular set of percentages, the data is specific to Smith Falls, but it doesn't vary that much from the other locations that were captured and broken down in the survey in 2022. So you've got sleep, you've got a sense of safety. Those look like pretty good targets for us to be looking at moving forward on. Next screen, please. But when we were asked at a couple of councils whether we had goals, we could identify what our goals were, we said no. There are these two target areas, but we won't know what the goals are until we sit down and we do the goal setting workshop that took place in this summer, and also importantly a youth summit that took place this summer. Okay. Goals. So this is what we've done since we spoke to you in the spring. There was a goal setting workshop in Carlton Place, June 1st, 2023. There was a youth summit that took place outside of Carlton Place in August of this summer. We have ongoing youth engagement groups that are occurring. I can't give you a time schedule, but they've been ongoing throughout the summer, where we're engaging groups. We have a couple of youth members who are doing some really interesting things at Carlton Place High School in terms of trying to generate activities or elements that make or provide a greater degree of comfort or safety within that environment. There's the Public Health Agency of Canada Roundtable, funding opportunities through that, and David will speak to that as we get to that page. And then there's our ongoing effort to find funding. We continue to be, of the agencies or entities in the country that are doing Planet Youth now, and there are a number across the country, I think we remain the only one that is entirely voluntary, being run by volunteers. Carrie, please. Next page, please. The goal setting workshop in June took place at the Zion Memorial Church in Carlton Place. We had approximately 75 people attend, 50 in person, 25 virtually. We had representation from school boards, from the OPP, from municipal councils, and also from the general public. We also had two youth from Lanark County make a presentation and speak to the group, which was very impactful. It's a really vibrant young group that's being developed there. The format was speakers and also breakout groups to talk about specific issues in their area, what they thought their agency or the community would see as a priority or as a target zone. Out of that workshop came two goals: improving youth sleep and improving youth feeling safer. Those mirrored the two pieces that looked like we were going to be looking at coming out of the data, but we wanted to go to the youth summit before we made any determination. Next page, please, Gary. The generations on the lake it was a beautiful day till it wasn't. It poured, but we were under the big tent. We had 20 local youth, ages 11 to 17, and we ran both a group for all of them, plus targeted groups split into the younger and the older groups, so we could get a different perspective from age groups as to what they were dealing with. The two key takeaways were not dissimilar from what came out of the workshop setting, goal setting workshop, but they were a little bit more detailed, a little more specific. The need for more supportive adults. Safety took a different definition. For the kids, it was both safe spaces, but more importantly, it was safe and adults that they felt they could engage with, who would not dismiss them, who would have some empathy for what they were talking about. The Youth Summit, next page please, Carrie, was extremely well supported and by agencies throughout Lanark County. Students' Commission of Canada, the Lanark County Interval House, the United Way of Eastern Ontario, the Leeds Grenville Lanark District Health Unit staff, Open Doors Lanark staff, the Lanark County Community Safety Planning Committee, Lanark County Community Justice, which had a very large discussion group session with the older groups, which was fascinating to listen to, and the local OPP. So there was a breadth of coverage, there was a breadth of interest and engagement. Out of that, we came up with two inclusive and critical exercises. From the two inclusive and critical exercises, the two focuses for the balance of the year were sleep. Adolescents 13 to 18 need 8 to 10 good hours of sleep, and ideally that's going to be synchronized with the circadian rhythm shift that goes through people in their adulthood, young adulthood. And I had to look up what circadian shifts was all about. I did that this morning, and it's just the rhythm of sleep patterns and how people are affected by when they need sleep, what they get out of sleep, depending on where they're getting it during the day, how much they're getting. And as I said earlier, the two things, the greater detail coming out of the Youth Summit was, it wasn't just about physical space in the schools and where they are. It was also feeling safe and knowing that there was somebody that they could go to and speak with. And that's a question of engaging teachers to be more than just educators, to being safe places to go. And the result of both of those things is that the environment becomes both more inclusive and that where people are able to feel more comfortable being themselves. That was those three issues were really critical coming out of the Youth Summit. Next page, please. And David's going to speak a little bit more about the sleep information because it involves clearly discussions around all sorts of parts of the community, not just schools. So David, go ahead.
Oh, sure.
Just talk about that, please.
Sure. I came off a not very good evening of sleep. I'm sorry I'm late. So the concept of circadian rhythm, that's as John said, is sort of your natural rhythm, and science tells us that adolescents, as you sort of enter puberty and for some period of time, maybe 6 or 7 hours or 6 or 7 years, if you remember your own childhood, or maybe you have teenagers at home, they tend to go to sleep later at night and they prefer to wake up later during the day. So that's a natural thing that happens. And there's actually, just in the last year, there's been a Canadian consortium of sleep researchers that was formed, and part of what they're doing is doing some advocacy around sleep in general as a very important risk factor to be managed to promote good health. One of those representatives, or a researcher from that organization, appeared as an expert on a panel that was Upper Canada Board presented 2 weeks ago. They're doing a consultation on looking at changing bell times with the idea of improving adolescent sleep. Right now across Lanark County, high school students start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Some of them are on the bus for an hour, hour and 10, an hour and 15 minutes. So maybe they're getting up at 6 o'clock, and if they don't actually fall asleep until 11:30, it means they're getting way less than 7 hours of sleep, which is what we saw in our survey. We saw 69% of grade 10s in the 2022 survey report that they sleep less than 7 hours a night. Last night I was looking at when I wasn't sleeping, I was looking at some data from Ireland. There's a Planet Youth group there, a Planet Youth activity, which has done 5 years of work now. And they're reporting it's about 50%. So a 20% difference from what's happening in the west of Ireland in a community called Mayo County, which is kind of similar to Lanark County in its makeup. So the higher number that we're seeing in Lanark County is pretty consistent with what other reports that I've read across Canada are. So it's an issue, and we saw in our data that kids that sleep less than 7 hours a night, grade 10s, mind you, they're more than twice as likely to report that they've been drunk in the last 30 days before the survey, that they've consumed cannabis. And kids that sleep, and they self-report their mental and physical health as being less good or less healthy than kids who sleep more than 8 hours. Kids who slept more than 8 hours in our survey were more than almost, I think, 2.5 times more likely to say they're happy. So there's a pretty strong data associations there, and there's science to back it up. So it's great that the Upper Canada Board is starting on this process. It's a controversial process. There's lots of energy in the community about whether high school students should just get up early and tough it out. And there's also lots of issues with daycare, especially for young kids, after school care, before care, that kind of thing. So I think it's a thorny issue, but it's one that the Upper Canada Board is looking at, and we're trying to back it up with our data, we're trying to back up the discussion with our data and introducing some experts to it. So that's, I think, an example of the kinds of things that we see happening with the kind of data that we're gathering in partnership with other organizations. So I guess that it's up to the Upper Canada Board what they're going to do there. But it's an ongoing exercise.
Okay. The other thing that's happened in the last month and a half is that we now have 2 youth actually sitting as regular members on the steering committee, which seemed like a no-brainer. Kind of went, why do we not have kids sitting here and contributing at every meeting? It's been invaluable. Much as going through the youth summit in the summer was invaluable. It brings a whole more realistic tone and understanding to the discussions that we're having at the steering committee, which is really great. Additionally, the 2 youth that are sitting on the committee are also 2 of the driving force at Carleton Place High School around the discussion about safe places and letting teachers know how important it is for that connectivity to be there for the kids that need to talk to somebody, need some safe place, a safe person to talk to. That's catching, that's really started to take to get some traction, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And we're hoping that we can maybe move that out of CPHS and into other schools using the experience at CPHS and the students that are getting that experience to help other kids set up similar things in other schools. And it's not a directive thing, it's a discussion. It's trying to get the adults involved to get onto the same page as the kids that need the support. Thanks, Carrie. Again, Dave is gonna talk to you about the Public Health Agency and what's happening with that at this point.
Okay. So in the spring federal budget, there was, as part of a larger strategy around mental health and substance use prevention, the federal government announced $20.2 million is going to be spent over 5 years supporting communities to adopt the Icelandic prevention model. So that's a very exciting announcement. It had to go through finance and get all the sort of accountability agreements in place. So on November 28th, a call was issued around this, how this money is, the program design and how this money is going to be spent. And there are 3 aspects of the announcement. The first one is the so-called Call for Stream 1 funding, which came out on November 28th, closes in middle of January. And it's for communities that have not yet embraced the model. So Lanark County is not eligible for that because we're into step 4 and 5 of the so-called 10-step model. Sometime in the spring of 2024, Stream 2 call will go out, and it's a by invitation call, and it's going to be targeted at communities that are already have embraced the model. There's a number of required elements to be, from what I could see, there's not a lot on the website yet, but there's a number of required elements to be qualified for to be part of that call. You have to have formally embraced the model that exists, that is supported by Planet Youth, which is sort of the mothership in Reykjavik, the School of Public Health in Reykjavik. We're there. We were the first community in Canada to sign up for that. You have to have a plan for doing a formal evaluation of your work after the 3 years that the funding will be available. That framework has been developed. It's available. You can see it on the Government of Canada website. It has Planet Youth Lanark County all over it. It was developed with some money that came from the Public Health Agency of Canada, flowed through Open Doors, Lanark Children and Youth, and the actual work was done by a lady named Tanya Halsell, who was at the time was a doctorate fellow at the Royal Institute for Mental Health Research. So we've got that piece. So I'm cautiously optimistic, actually I'm very optimistic that we're going to be included in that call to make a proposal. The call will be for proposals around developing interventions, and the money that's available, the maximum amount of money that's available is $250,000 a year for 3 years. So potentially we could be bringing $750,000 to Lanark County to support this kind of work. We need to do a lot of work. It's a real call to action for us to develop an absolutely rock solid plan, because I want to knock it out of the park and bring that money to the county, and because we can do great work with it. We certainly have a lot of work to do to put meat on the bones of a plan for that, but I would say a high level kind of concept that we're kicking around is that we want to be very much working in concert with youth centers, and I think there's a real opportunity to have some of that money flow through youth centers to do programming, to do interventions in our communities using the youth centers as a base, and perhaps expand their market right now. Right now, youth centers, I think, serve Big Brothers Big Sisters kind of goes up to maybe 15, 16, and we hope that we can maybe expand that a little bit to older kids and start doing some things that are that may be more comprehensive and maybe get things working a little bit better, and this money would be very significant in helping that out. So that's an exciting opportunity. So the other thing that the Public Health Agency is doing is they are taking over the role of kind of chairing what's called a community of practice. So there's going to be a national forum for exchanging information from communities that are doing this kind of work, sharing best practices. And a part of this budget that they've talked about is creating a so-called knowledge exchange center, so they'll be doing that as well. While I have the floor, I'll also say that there was a grant application that was submitted through the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan last August, and we have we're included in that grant application, and if that is successful, the target for that would be to support more of the engagement activities that John was talking about around the feeling safety and doing some more building on what was done at the Youth Summit, and hopefully having sort of like maybe one or two of those a year. One of them would be youth oriented, and one of them would be inviting sort of the general public to be part of there, to sort of encourage that kind of discussion that will create those kinds of relationships and that knowledge across the broader community, across where we live, that there's something that we can do here. So I think we're on the cusp of some good things, but right now we're still kind of doing it off the side of our desks. So to that end, as we are starting to do work, and we're also working through MPP Jordan's office, trying to communicate with what our plans are and the opportunities are to Minister DeBolo, Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. And it would be great to have, sort of letters of endorsement or support from folks like yourselves saying, we've heard about this, we're interested in it, we think it's a good thing. That would be, I think, be a very powerful thing. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Karen, next screen, please. David's covered that one, so we can move on to the next one. In summary, we think that there's a lot of real positive momentum right now. Certainly the steering committee feels that way. We're seeing things happening in the county that there are pieces of the puzzle starting to gravitate toward each other and work together. It's the whole process of trying to keep ourselves from sitting in silos, and the only way to do that is to keep the communication flowing. If we say we're going to come back and give you an update, then we owe you an update. If we say that we need to talk to somebody, we need to follow through on that. And that's been a lot of effort, trying to be accountable for the efforts that we are making. We've been doing a lot of taking the data from the 2022 survey, talking about it, offering it to people who need information to look at what they're doing themselves. And so it's helpful to other agencies when they can see data that they might not otherwise have. The network building will continue. It's going to continue with communities, with organizations. It's going to continue, especially with the youth. Hopefully that evolves as we go along. So we'll continue to reach out, as David said, to folks like you, to school boards, to youth organizations, to try and bring them into a part of that information sharing package. Our website is on the screen, and there's always new information up there to take a look at. As I mentioned earlier, we are in the process of getting ready to prep the survey for 2024, which we hope would be delivered in the spring of 2024. That'll give us a chance to look at data that was received in 22 and what it says 2 years down the stream as to whether or not it's changed. If it hasn't changed, what we are doing, what we can continue to do. If there's shifts, what do we need to look at that's different? And what do we need to share with the communities to say, I'm not sure what you've been doing, folks, but there's something that's really good or something that's maybe we need to take a look at that's different in the last 2 years. Different set of kids, same age group. So it's grade 10 students, and then 2 years later, our grade 8s are now grade 10s, and they're going to tell us about it. But they're going to have more experience from whatever they've touched on. If it's a safer place at school to be at during that 2-year growth period, they're going to have that information. That's going to tell us something. And as David says, there's going to be funding efforts that are ongoing or will have to continue to be ongoing. We invite you to ask us questions. We invite you to come to meetings if we have them available. And we invite you just to think about what you as individuals or you as a council can offer beyond what you're already doing for the youth of the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And as much as you've indicated that it's not, your efforts are maybe not sustainable and volunteer driven, you build an incredible foundation for this program in Lander County, and with funding hopefully on the horizon for next year, the opportunity to hire staff and keep this moving forward. Obviously deeply meaningful, especially for the long-term benefit of our youth as they become adults and the future of our communities. So I just want to open up for questions or comments.
Have you
Go ahead.
have you had the opportunity to sit in with youth centers?
We have, I actually sit on the board at the YAC in
Okay.
Perth. And then we have YAC sits on, and other youth centers have representation on the steering committee as well. So the simple answer is yes. The broader answer is I don't think that we can move forward without that connection to youth centers, because that's where the pulse is on what's going on, especially with vulnerable youth in the community. So they're a critical piece of the collaboratives we're trying to do.
Awesome. Thank you.
So with that, do you have engagement with Smith Falls, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and YAC?
With the youth center here, I haven't spoken to them. I know that YAC and each of the youth centers are they have a functional group of the 5 youth centers in the county, and they meet regularly. So there's that communication and sharing of ideas. Have we sat down and made a presentation at the youth center, at any particular youth center? I don't think so, David. You know better.
Big Brother Big Sisters was present. Staff was present at the August Youth Summit that John spoke about, and there's some meetings that are actually planned for January. Our governance, because we're an ad hoc group, our governance and our financial oversight is provided by Open Doors for Lander Children and Youth, and Kevin Cloutier, who's the executive director there, is actually got a meeting set up in January, so we're moving ahead towards that. So, but we've had an ongoing dialogue from the beginning.
And just one of the things I think probably in hindsight I should have put into the presentation is that you need to keep reminding people that Planet Youth, Lander County, we're not an agency. We're not a deliverer of a program. We're not a program. Our goal is to incite the discussion, to keep the discussion going, to break down communication barriers, and to give data to the people that are working on the front lines with the kids, to the police, to the schools, to the youth centers. So we're not a program, but we are, I hope we're an ever-growing repository of information and encouragement and suggestions.
Well, I know reading, I think it was a Globe Mail this morning, talked about the mental health crisis with youth in Canada, and the wait times, the volume of people, of youth that are struggling. I don't remember the numbers, but it was like 28,000, I think, in Ontario alone. The sleep factor, and I know having 3 teenagers at home, the challenge in getting someone moving in the morning, it's a really early start, and then they're tired when they go home from school and may have a nap, and then they are up later because they can't sleep because they have a nap in the afternoon or doing homework late. So that cycle is difficult. I think kids are all struggling to get the volume of sleep that they need. Maybe it's something the school boards will recognize that later start times would be more appropriate.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to make sure we say that the school boards and the bus times and that kind of thing. That's one. I think it's an important aspect, but it's not the only thing. And so, drawing inspiration from what we've seen with other Planet Youth communities, there's a real opportunity for us, as Planet Youth Lander County, and with our in the collaboration we're talking about, to kind of get some better awareness of the importance of sleep out into the larger community, and to kind of make available to families and other organizations that are planning programming for kids about the importance of taking that into account in their sort of daily schedules. So we haven't had the opportunity. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day with resources we have available to us, but there are some other things we've been thinking about. For example, there's some technology, there's some apps that have been built to help kids with that. Like I think everybody suspects that screen time and time with your phone is part of the problem. Although I can tell you that in our data, we have a chart in one of our reports that shows that even kids that report sleeping less than an hour, or screen time less than an hour a day outside of school, still more than 50% of them are not sleeping well enough. So there are multiple factors here, and we believe we have a role to help kind of get that out there, and hopefully through organizations like those sleep researchers we're talking about, we can arrange some public forums to kind of get that out there as well. So schools are important. Schools are huge. They're absolutely critical for us in developing strategies, but they're not the only thing. We're not laying it at the feet of the schools and saying it's all your fault. That's not at all what we're doing.
Peter?
Just thank you for the presentation. It's always great talking to you guys. Just that it's so tempting, and as a society we respond to an issue, whether it's youth suicide or children coming into conflict with the law, or dropping out of school, or getting pregnant when they didn't really want to. But so we were pretty good at responding. Well, this is really about looking at 10 years from now. So we don't invest in health promotion and prevention. We give it lip service. So this is we won't see returns. We might see, everybody likes a nice short-term win, but these are long-term gains that I think tie in to our next presentation around basic income and getting families stable and supported. So these are long-term, and your community development is what it is. So I'm excited about it because I'm interested in prevention and health promotion. And because all the money goes to reacting. So we want to just have a little bit for prevention and promoting good health. So it's great.
Any further questions or comments?
Just in line with the mental health of the youth, you spoke about their space in school, as well as if they need some talking to someone. I know that the meaning of peer support may not be really effective when it comes to youth, because youth are not supposed to carry, mental stress of somebody else. I'm not sure how, I don't have psychological knowledge, but I don't know about the system of the schools, and if they don't have it, what are the options out there for the kids if they need to speak to someone who is not a parent and who is not a school authority?
I think there's a challenge in most of our communities to get professional help when kids need professional help. But it's because of the spotlight that is on the question of youth mental health right now, I think that there are some initiatives out there that are starting to take hold. And I'm not here to speak for YAC in Perth, but we have a counselor. We have Monday night mental health nights, where the kids that come to our program have somebody that they can speak to in that environment, and we're in the process of trying to expand that so that it's available. So as David says, it's not all about the school. It's my reading of Planet Youth, and the reason that when David talked to me about it, I felt that I wanted to get involved is because, as Peter says, it is about a community response, a societal response to the question. Mental health is one of those pieces, and that yes, the school can do things. Yes, the kids can do things in the school to make the school a safer place for them by communicating, by advocating for themselves. But it's not just there. It's everywhere. It's social media. How do you deal with social media where there's bullying and whatnot against vulnerable kids? It's a societal issue. And the more I read about Planet Youth, the more I realized that it is the community having each other's backs about what's good for their kids. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes and no. Kind of the reason I'm saying no is because the reason that I mentioned the schools is because kids spend most of their time during the day at the school. So in case they need a immediate, immediate someone to be able to speak, who is not working for the school. Because safety, one of the reasons that people step back from talking is that, okay, how is it going to be publicized? If they fear that they are not going to be safe in what they're saying and that's not going to be kept secret, even if it is related to their social media stuff, if that safety is not there, safety measurement in terms of, okay, this person, I can talk with them without fearing that my parents would know, my school would know, they wouldn't open up. However, they may not also want to go to another center to reach out, because sometimes for someone who has mental health challenges, it's difficult for them to reach out. So it's good if, like, when you have your negotiations with the community as well as with the schools, to bring that up, even though they can bring someone and give them the space to be there present for the kids, so that the kids can go to and feel like, okay, this person is here only to hear me. I think that would be very.
So I think that they haven't done a good enough job advertising the fact that there is the ability to be anonymous for making reporting and communicating with things. There's the schools had different Zoom and FaceTime links, as well as phone call links, as well as text messaging for mental health support. So they do have people within the schools that they can talk to if they feel comfortable and aren't concerned about the anonymity of it, right? But there is also avenues and options for more anonymous type reporting, because it's recognized globally that it's hard to break that cycle if they don't feel like they can trust the process, right? A lot of times we're the ones that go, and just this label on our chest scares people, right? But because of the nature of society, when somebody's in crisis, we get the call first. So we have an MCERT team that works with us. Their mandate is of a certain age, but they provide information and guidance to find other resources within their age requirement that can accommodate what is required. If they want the anonymity, if they want to talk to somebody directly, they find resources. So I think there needs to be better promotion and advertisement of those types of things to be able to have for the kids.
So the community knows, like this, that the youth know that, okay, this is available in case I need it. So more of publicizing if it is available out there.
It's a very, very rich discussion that you're entering into, and it's a very complex problem, and I think it's one that we owe it to our communities to really engage in. There are a few things which hopefully will be coming to light in the next little while that there'll be an opportunity maybe to come back and brief you on. And I can tell you that Open Doors they're offering services like in the community through the youth centers as well. So it's not every day, but there are some opportunities there. And there's also some talk. Dr. Paul Muliotis was on the panel for the sleep panel, and he's recently become the chair of Project STEP, which is a United Way funded activity in the city of Ottawa that's providing services like you're just talking about in schools. And I heard him say that he wanted to see that happen to all of Eastern Ontario. So that would be a good thing if that happens, but that would require a lot of financial.
And it is really complex. But one of the things that really caught me at the Youth Summit was the consistency that the kids talked about. They talked about adults, they talked about safety, but they talked about empathy. Mm-hmm. People who would listen to them. You don't have to be a professional to be empathetic to what's going on. At least try to understand. That was a really, to me, a really significant, overarching kind of comment from the kids. From the horse's mouth, they are the best sources for where they're feeling the shortfall is. But yes, it's really complex. David's right, and yes, we need to do a better job of getting out the information as to where they can go. But I think there has to be an attitude or understanding within the people that are working with you, wherever that is. They need to be listening and trying to understand. It's a good base point.
I know our youth center here, that's of course WAC, that's operated by Big Brothers Big Sisters, and it is a safe space. There is staff who are trained and empathetic and compassionate, and they're also linked to resources. So we do have the ability to connect youth who are in having difficult situations to resources that make a difference for them. So I was there the other night, there was 40 kids in there. It's chaos, but there's incredible staff and volunteers that are making a real difference with youth.
So I heard an ask, which was a letter of support through MVP Jordan, right? So if you, I think we should at least do that if we haven't already.
And council has sought a delegation with Association of Tobolo, the Roma Conference in January. So we don't know if we'll get it or not. If we do, though, we can probably have this agenda.
I have a briefing note that I sent to MVP Jordan, so I'll forward that to
All right.
you, and I'll copy his office on that, so you know that that's there. He did say that he was going to try to engage Minister Tobolo and caucus and have a discussion around it, and actually I have a follow-up meeting with John booked for January 12th, so we'll see what's happened there, but that would be really great. And,
Super.
If you're speaking to your colleagues from other municipalities across the county, please encourage them to do the same thing. I have a meeting this afternoon with Mark Hinton Councillor Hinton from Carleton Place, talking about much the same thing.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We really appreciate the update, your commitment, and I know you'll be there to see this through. So moving on to our agenda, I want to welcome Rob Rader. Rob is the chair of the steering committee for the Leonard Basic Income Network. Rob's also Rio T Valley Township on the 600 County Council and has been actively involved in advocating against poverty and poor basic income for
Copy of the.
decades. Is that?
Thank you.
How old do you think I am, Sean?
Thank you.
Not decades, but
Thank you.
15 years.
Sorry, at the table.
Yeah,
for sure.
David goes to my wife's church. My wife's the music director of Zion Memorial Church. We've had lots of email on Planet Youth, but we've never met.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So again, small town living.
Yes.
I've got some slides. The bigger screens would be better, but since you're seated there, if you're okay looking at the smaller screens, that's fine. I'll stand here, and I'm just going to signal to Carrie to move the slides for me. Thanks, John. But just by way of further introduction, yes, I'm the Reeve of Tay Valley Township, and I think we would also be delighted to give you a letter of support, David. So if you send me the same information you're going to send to Sean, then I will just take it forward to my council. Probably, we're not going to meet until February, actually, but I can just encourage us to provide a letter of support without you having to make a presentation.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm not here wearing my hat as Reeve of Tay Valley Township. I'm wearing the hat as chair of the steering committee of the Lanark Basic Income Network, which was founded earlier this year. So I've given you a brochure, and on the back is the email address lanarkbasicincome@gmail.com, which I actually am managing currently. So if you have any questions after my remarks after today, you can shoot me an email and we can continue the conversation. LBIN is a member-based group. We are actively seeking members, and we encourage people to join for nothing or up to $20. Resources help us purchase some merchandise, some signs, just have some capacity to do some things. So we've actually raised over $3,000 this year and spent about half of that so far. We have about 75. We have 75 members as of today. 75 members, including some here in Smith Falls, some in Carleton Place, many in Perth, Drummond, North Elmsley, Tay Valley Township, Lanark Highlands. which is great, but we want many more than 75. We want as many as we can get because we're part of a national movement. So I'll just go through the slides here. I'm just going to stand back here, cranking my head so much. Okay, so I gave this presentation on November 29th at the table in Perth, and it was well received. And I'm calling it Basic Income 101 for those of you who don't really know very much about basic income. So these are the 9 questions I'm going to run through. What is basic income? How does it work? What are some examples? What are some benefits? Does basic income discourage work? How much does basic income cost? How can basic income be financed? What is the state of basic income in Canada, and what can be done to support this cause? So next slide. So there's different definitions out there about what basic income is, and I've never found anything to be particularly satisfying. So this is mine, and I tried to be very precise with this wording. So basic income is money distributed to eligible people regularly, reliably, and without work requirement, and which, absent other income, should meet basic human needs. And we can talk the rest of this meeting about that definition. But how does it work? Well, the devil's in the details. This is a very elegant concept at a high level, but when you get into the details, it becomes very, very thorny. So next slide. So here are the kinds of questions that have to be answered in designing a basic income program. The main questions. And really the biggest one is who should be eligible. So there's 2 ways basic income is delivered, essentially. One is called the universal basic income, and you'll see that phrase out there a lot, UBI, universal basic income. And when people say that, they can mean different things, but literally what that should mean is that it's a universality of receipt. Virtually everybody gets it. And I'll give you an example of a program that is just that very thing. The other model is what's called income-tested basic income. So the basic income, if you receive basic income, it is based on what other income is in your picture. And basically, as your other income rises, the basic income phases out. I'll give you some examples of that as well. There can be hybrids of these 2 models. Next slide. What should the maximum amount of basic income be? If the basic income is income tested, what should the benefit reduction rate be? In other words, how quickly will the basic income phase out? Should the basic income be provided to individuals or to families or households based on family or household size? Next slide. How often should the basic income be paid? How will the program be financed? Should the federal government alone, or the provinces alone, or both levels of government be responsible for policy design and program delivery? Next slide. So this gives you a depiction of what an income-tested basic income would look like. So theoretically, if a person has no other income, on the left, they would receive the maximum basic income that the program provides. And then as other income comes into the picture, that basic income phases out, and eventually the person or the household receives no basic income at all. That's the income-tested model of basic income. Next slide. So some examples. Well, actually, to give you an indication of how topical this item is, Stanford University actually has a basic income lab with people who do nothing but study basic income. And this is a map from their website of basic income experiments around the world. It's probably a little bit dated now because there's actually been over 100 pilots of various kinds in the United States alone in the last few years. Next slide. But I'll give you some examples in Canada of programs actually that the main ones, we don't actually call them basic income, but in their fundamentals of design, they're like an income-tested basic income. So we'll start with the Canada Child Benefit. This will be of particular interest, I think, to David Sompi, the Planet Youth It's like Climate Network, Planet. I can never get those 3 words in the same order consistently. So the Canada Child Benefit is basically, it's an income-tested basic income that goes to most households with children under 18. Surprisingly, it phases out when household income or family income is at a fairly high level, like $180,000, $190,000. So that would cover most households with children under the age of 18. And you can see by the colored lines, there's actually two benefit reduction rates. There's one that's a bit steeper at the beginning, and then there's one that's a little more gradual to allow that basic income to phase out at a very high level of family net income. So that kind of has the effect of almost making it universal to households with children under 18, other than households with fairly high family income. Next slide. Old age security and the guaranteed income supplement are also, if you will, forms of basic income for seniors. The old age security is almost universal in that most adults in Canada, most who are 65 or over, will qualify for it. The guaranteed income supplement is more of an incontested basic income. It's really meant to go towards lower income seniors. Next slide. And just in the last few years, some provinces have begun to establish their own basic income programs. They are fairly targeted, which in a way goes against the spirit and the intent of basic income, but at least they're using the language of basic income. And they've recognized that they need to be doing more than their traditional forms of income security. So in Newfoundland and Labrador, which is led by a premier who's a physician, so I think he really understands the importance of income within a health context. But his government has brought in two programs in the last year. One is a basic income program for youth who are receiving residential services. In other words, youth who are in housing and needing some help as they move towards transitioning out of that. So in addition to existing supports, they're now able to receive up to $600 per month as a basic income. And then just last month, they brought in a basic income program for adults aged 60 to 64, which is really interesting because that age group is fairly vulnerable. These are adults who don't yet qualify for the seniors benefits, who may be facing health challenges, who may not be able to train or retrain or transition to other forms of work if their employment has disappeared. So that age cohort can be fairly vulnerable. So Newfoundland is the first province to bring in, if you will, a basic income for adults aged 60 to 64 who are in low income already. Next slide. And then Quebec also brought in, at the beginning of this year, a basic income program for persons with fairly severe disabilities. Again, this is very targeted. And it kind of goes against the grain of the spirit and the intent of basic income, where you're trying to get away from that targeting. But they're using the language of it, and I think they've recognized that their existing programs don't go far enough. So it's exciting to me that some provinces are moving in this direction and giving some validity to the concept of basic income. Next slide. And then I just threw in this slide on Alaska because it's really so interesting. Alaska, since the late 70s, has had, if you will, a form of basic income. This is actually a universal program. If you're an adult in Alaska and you're not in jail and you've lived in the state for a year, you're eligible. You just have to apply. And as the bottom graphic shows, over 500,000 Alaskans already have. Apply by September 20th, and then in the fall of the year, you get a single payment. And it varies. It's ranged from $1,000 US to, in this case, almost $3,300 US per adult. So, a household of two adults could, last year would have received $6,600 US in the fall as their universal basic income. And that's paid for coming out of the state's natural resources revenue, particularly their oil and gas revenue. Anyways, it's just an interesting example of actually a long-standing program that many basic income advocates have pointed to, although the actual amount of income available is fairly modest, it wouldn't be enough to actually overcome poverty, for example. So what are some benefits of basic income? So I'm just going to mention five big ones, not to say that there aren't others. One is to honor our human rights commitments, to improve individual and family physical and mental health, to cushion people against economic vulnerability and support people through uncertainty and transitions, to stimulate local economies, and to reduce income and wealth inequality. And I'm going to give you one or two slides on each of those points. Next slide. For me, this is really important that basic income can help honor Canada's national and international human rights commitments. We have the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Section 7, which talks about the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. And very interestingly, in the summer, this summer, a judge in Waterloo ruled that the regional municipality of Waterloo could not clear away the tent encampments in the city because many of the people in those encampments did not have housing they could go into. So that ruling affirmed that everyone has the right to life, liberty. The judge cited Section 7 of the Charter, which was precedent setting. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, also very, very important, written in 1948. That this is our 75th anniversary this year. Next slide. And within the Universal Declaration is this very important Article 25, right to an adequate standard of living, where it basically recognizes that everyone has a right to a standard of living that's adequate for their health and those of their family. And it talks about the right to food, clothing, housing, medical care, and so forth. Next slide. As Peter well knows, as chair of the Health Unit Board, and Sean and others in the room, I'm sure you know, income is one of the social determinants of health. There's a bunch of social determinants of health, and Planet Youth Lanark is working on some of those, which is great. This is the income piece, and next slide. The relation between income and health is powerful. It's a straight line correlation. The lower the income, the worse the health outcomes. As income rises, health tends to improve. So this physician in Toronto on the left here, Dr. Gary Block, who I had a chance to meet a number of years ago, has this nice quote: almost every major health condition occurs more often and has worse outcomes among people who live at low incomes. And we have tons of data on this. So for, if I have to make one single argument in favor of basic income, it would be this argument, that it leads to better health outcomes. And of course, health is everything. So next slide. Basic income can cushion people through economic vulnerability and support people through uncertainty and transitions. If you just roll it a little bit more there, Carrie, just so I get all the bullet points. So I tried to capture here, I think I've got them all here. I think there's 12 or 13. Ways in which people are vulnerable. And I've talked to people, even the last presentation I gave on November the 29th, it was a small business owner in Perth, and he doesn't support this policy. I try to impress upon him on just how vulnerable we all are to any of these circumstances, which can cast you into low income. And then you discover that, whoa, there aren't the supports out there that I thought there were. So vulnerability is always present, and it's a question of just how strong is our social safety net. And currently our social safety net for adults between the ages of 18 and 64 is not as robust as it ought to be. Next slide. Basic income also is meant to flow to primarily people who are in lower to middle income, and most of that money, if not all of it, would tend to recirculate in the economy fairly quickly as people spend it on things that they need. We do have data around the Canada Child Benefit to show that for every dollar invested, it grows the gross domestic product by $2. And I think that's largely because of the improved sort of child outcomes that result from that particular form of income security. Next slide. And then just scroll back up so we capture the wording at the top there, Carrie. Yeah. High levels of income and wealth inequality linked to negative economic and social outcomes, whereas greater equality links to better outcomes. We also have very powerful data from around the world on just how important it is to try to realize societies that have greater equality, not less. And Canada, like many countries, is sort of trending somewhat in the wrong direction, although to the federal government's credit, they have brought in some measures in recent years that, I think allow us to be a little more equal, but there's no question we could go further. Next slide. Does basic income discourage work? The answer is no, it does not. Next slide. And we know this from data. We know this from evidence. There's been so many studies on not just basic income, but other forms of cash transfer programs and how they affect people's engagement in the labor market. So this quote is taken from a book by a group of authors who are actually negative on basic income, but it's an important book for advocates like me to read and understand those arguments. However, they do say with regard to the work issue, that overall they find that basically basic income it will not yield a significant impact on labor for it to be a factor as to whether to decide on such a policy. Next slide. And then this study out of the Stanford Basic Income Lab from 2020, looking at a range of income security programs around the world, also found that cash transfer programs do not impact labor market participation, and some studies even report some increase in work participation, which is really, really interesting. And we could talk definitely more about why that might be. Next slide. And part of the reason I think basic income is more apt to support people in labor engagement than retard it is that it can help people manage work, career, and personal transitions. It can provide security from which to pursue education, training, and the work one most wants to do or try. And I brought along 4 copies. I'll leave them with you, Sean or Carrie. 4 copies of this really interesting little publication, came out a few months ago by Basic Income Canada Youth Network. David, you should know about these guys. It's called Room to Dream, a zine, I guess, which is youth speak for magazine, about the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. What they did is they gathered testimonials from participants in the Ontario Basic Income Pilot project of 5 or 6 years ago, and the difference that participants were finding being on that program for about 15 months. There's many testimonials to hear about how people changed the direction of their lives, believing that they would be secure for 3 years with the Basic Income Pilot. Unfortunately, it was prematurely terminated by the government. But there's a lot of testimonials that sort of back this, that when people have that security, now they have the confidence to start to make some changes in their life, maybe decide to go in a different line of work, pursue some training, and so forth. Next slide. Basic income also, really importantly, can support people who engage in valuable work which may not be valued in the paid labor market. David and John spoke about the need for youth to have adults that they can go to. Well, those could be in the school, but they could be also outside the school. And maybe there's people who would be great at doing that kind of, if you will, informal peer support or informal adult support. And maybe having a little bit of a basic income could help some people in engaging in that kind of work. Lots of work is not amenable to the paid labor market. It could be caregiving, it could be tutoring. If you just scroll down a little bit more, it could be the pursuit of various arts. It could be doing some environmental stewardship. Lots of work is not amenable to the paid labor market. Basic income would provide a bit of a floor for people to actually engage in more of that. Next slide. How much does basic income cost? These are some figures from a number of reports that have and papers that have come out in recent years, and you can see there's a huge range, and that's because it all depends on what the program parameters are, what the design parameters are. So there is no one answer to what would a basic income program cost. But as you can see, we are talking significant numbers. Certainly in terms of a national program, we're in the many billions of dollars. Next slide. We have experience in designing and implementing big programs, starting with the Canada Child Benefit, which this year is valued at about $25 billion. And that's a program of some long standing. It's changed over the years in both its name and some of its design details, but it goes back, I think, Sean, you might know more about that. I think it goes back to the early 1990s, I believe, the original federal child benefits. Yeah. And OAS and GIS, Old Age Security and the Guaranteed Income Supplement, currently is a $68 billion program that is projected to rise significantly as our population continues to age. And then very critically to keep in mind is that we are already paying significantly for the poverty that we have in our midst. And there's been studies done on this and cost estimates on what poverty costs our society. So the range here is 68 to 83 billion. And you'll see that I've got some sources for many of these slides. So if you would like to get this deck, I'm sure Carrie can circulate it to you, but you can go to those links and you can look up that information where these figures are drawn from. Next slide. How can basic income be financed? Just scroll just a little bit more. Yeah. So John Kenneth Galbraith was a great Canadian economist. He served in the Kennedy administration. I think he lived and worked a lot in the United States. But he did, in one of his books, he did write about how a rich country must give everybody the assurance of a basic income. This can be afforded and would be a major source of social tranquility. So there's lots of eminent figures like this who are confident that basic income can be well financed. Next slide. And these are just some options that I drew from a range of reports and studies. I'm not going to go into any detail on any of these, but it's to give you a sense of some of the range of the kinds of things that can raise many, many, many billions of dollars. I think between the 13 examples on the screen here, I added up over 100 billion, well over 100 billion amongst all of these measures, some of which would be relatively non-controversial to bring in. Others would obviously be a political challenge. But to try to impress that Canada is a big, wealthy country, we actually have a lot of fiscal capacity. It's a question of where we direct our priorities. And it also speaks somewhat to what we value. Next slide. And basic income advocates do have to be mindful that, of course, there are competing demands for public funding. Some examples here: more support for seniors, for the childcare, housing, the armed forces. And I need to remind myself of that too, because I'm very passionate about basic income, but even if we could find a chunk of money over here, in theory, to support it, I know that there's other demands on those dollars. Next slide. So what's the state of basic income in Canada? Well, we have compelling evidence from, just go up to the top one there, just back up to number 1. Okay. Yeah. We have compelling evidence from basic income pilot programs in Manitoba in the 1970s and from Ontario, 2017, 2018. We have long-established programs like the Canada Child Benefit, Old Age Security, for which we do have some very good research that's been done on the impacts of those programs. We have two bills on Parliament Hill, Bill C-223 and Senate Bill S-2233. They are both the exact same language. One's in the House, one's in the Senate. The one in the Senate has advanced through second reading, and it's before the Senate Standing Committee on National Finance. We're hoping it moves through third reading, and then it would go back to the House. And what it would call for, actually, I've got another slide on that, so we'll go into more details. I mentioned the two new provincial programs in Newfoundland and Quebec. We have a very detailed, very credible proposal for a basic income program in Prince Edward Island. We have many municipal resolutions in support of basic income, including quite a few from Ontario in recent months. Hamilton, Regional Municipality of Waterloo, North Bay, Guelph, Napanee, Grimsby. Not Tay Valley yet.
Oh.
I haven't brought this to Tay Valley yet. And our group, the Lanark Basic Income Network, does hope to secure resolutions from the municipalities in Lanark County. We have national, provincial, regional, and local basic income advocacy groups from coast to coast to coast. We have support from some faith groups like the United Church of Canada, solidly behind this, and professional groups, both medical, public health, social work. We have some very good books, and I wanted to in particular mention this one by Dr. Evelyn Forget, one of our top experts, Basic Income for Canadians from the COVID-19 Emergency to Financial Security for All. Excellent book, very, very readable. Really is, if you only buy one book on basic income, this is the one to buy. They might have a copy at the library here. We have a copy at the Perth Library. So we have a number of books. We have also favorable public opinion polling. Next slide. So yeah, these two bills on Parliament Hill, they both call for the same thing, which is to develop a national framework for a guaranteed livable basic income act. So if this bill was to pass into law, the federal government would be obliged to engage in conversation with the provinces and the territories about essentially expanding the basic income framework we have. So we have the CCB, the Canada Child Benefit, we have the seniors programs. If that missing middle is the adults age 18 to 64. And so what kind of a program could work in Canada's federal, provincial context? That's what this bill would oblige. It wouldn't be to establish a basic income itself. It would be to establish a framework for basic income. And it would engender negotiation between different levels of government around this. So our fingers are crossed. They've held their hearings. There'll be a report coming out, I imagine, in early 2024 to the Senate committee, from the Senate committee, and then the rest of the Senate, I guess, will take it up. Next slide. Public opinion polling. There's been a number of polls which have been encouraging. This one is from 2022, and it asked questions about support for the income tested for basic income, and 6 out of 10 surveyed said yes, they support that. They also asked about the universal basic income, and almost 4 in 10 said that they would support that. Next slide. So how to support the cause of basic income? Read, watch, listen, learn. There is a lot to know. If you get passionate about it, you get into a lot of detail. Talk about this in related matters with family, friends, and others. Write to and speak with your political representatives, both municipal, provincial, and federal. Become a member of LBIN. There's strength in numbers. Volunteer with us. We have 3 committees: the steering committee, an outreach committee, and a political advocacy committee. We also will be meeting with John Jordan on the 15th. So, and engage and support other basic income advocacy groups. There's an Ontario Basic Income Network, a Basic Income Canada Network, Basic Income Canada Youth Network, and UBI Works Commonwealth Canada. Next slide. So as I mentioned, some notable books. There's Evelyn Forget's, the book on the upper right by Jamie Swift and Elaine Power there in Kingston. Their book is largely about the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Project, but very, very interesting because they go into a lot of detail about the history of that pilot, what effect it had on people, its cancellation, and so forth. Other books, just scroll a bit more, Carrie. The late Senator Hugh Segal, who passed away in August this year, someone who I did have a chance to get to know and work a little bit on this. And it was a huge inspiration. In fact, it was from him that I first learned about basic income. His sort of memoir, Bootstraps Need Boots, is very, very worth reading. And the next book, which I had a slide on before, the group of academics who really go into a lot of detail around basic income in the Canadian context. They're ultimately very negative, but I think their bias also very much shows through. Still, it's an important book for advocates to read and understand some of the arguments that people are making against basic income. And then just a couple other books here, which are more at the global level, but also very much worth reading, and certainly both put a strong plug for basic income. Next slide. And lastly, these are some of the basic income groups, beginning with the Lanark Basic Income Network and the other groups that I've mentioned. And I think at the very bottom, Carrie just have my email address. Maybe it's still on there. Nope. Okay.
That might be at the front.
Yeah. So you can reach me at the back of the brochure, lanarkbasicincome@gmail.com. If you send an email to that, I will get that. I actually have 6 email addresses that I manage, so this is one of them. So that is, one other thing. On January 29th, we're having a Basic Income 101 presentation. The same presentation will be given January 29th at the Public Health Office here in Smiths Falls, 7 to 8:30, and we're working with the Public Health Unit staff to set that up. We would encourage word to spread on that, and there'll be obviously lots of time there to answer questions and have some discussions. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Robin. One of the drivers for this committee is the recognition that Smiths Falls needs to be a community that works for everybody. And we know that we've got a housing crisis, a food security crisis, a lot of people living in difficult situations. And that really is an income issue. If the basic income was in place, we probably would have the same issues we have there. And poverty does have deep roots in our community. About 20% of our households have an income of less than $30,000 a year. 45% of our households have an income of less than $50,000, and 65% have an income of less than $80,000. So a basic income in Smiths Falls would be extremely meaningful. It would be a difference maker for so many of our citizens. And if we go back to 2017, the then provincial government was planning to pilot, the basic income pilot. And I brought it to our council at the time, suggesting that Smith Falls should be seeking the opportunity to be a pilot community. I believe we were probably the right laboratory to do that experiment and prove to the province and the world how much of a difference it would make. And surprisingly, at the time, it wasn't well received by council. And I think part of it is, Rob, we've touched on it in here, some of the, I guess, the mindset that, well, it's just going to make people dependent and people aren't going to want to work and it's just, it's going to feed the ability to just sit back, relax and live off your basic income. And there was a huge outcry from the community at the time. We had a big public meeting, numerous organizations were involved, and council eventually came around to the realization that, okay, well, it makes sense, this might be a good thing for our community. We did submit an interest in it. I think at that point it's probably too late and we weren't a successful community. And in the end, as we know, unfortunately, the pilot was canceled before it really had the opportunity to get, to truly prove the results I think we would like to see when the new government came in 2018. But, so I wanted Rob to be here today because I know Rob's such an incredible advocate, understands it so deeply, and I know how meaningful this would be to our community. So I wanted to have the opportunity to share this with everybody here. It's great to hear the session on the 29th. Part of my intention is that we would maybe delve a little bit deeper into this and create our own letter of support, resolution support that we could then advance to council for support. I think it's, Smith Falls does have a higher proportion of people living in poverty. We do have over 1,000 people in Smith Falls relying on Ontario Disability Support Program, which we know is extremely modest income, something that maybe we know that when you're that level of income, your quality of life is going to be very limited. So we are the perfect place for basic income, and so I think it's important that we sort of build the story and the narrative and have the opportunity to share that when we can.
Just three things, Sean. With regard to Smith Falls' interest a number of years ago in being one of the pilot sites, I learned that apparently over 100 municipalities in Ontario did express interest to the provincial government. So, you know, there's 444 municipalities in Ontario, so over 100 of them, roughly a quarter of them, expressed interest in being a pilot program site. So I think that says something. One of the definitely people can leap pretty quickly to, oh, people are just going to stay at home. And there'll always be a percentage of people who are not going to take advantage, if you will, of something. Or, I mean, as Hugh Siegel used to point out, credit card companies plan for 3 to 4%, default on credit card, debt. There's always going to be some people who, if you will, don't use a given program the way it's meant to be used. But I believe that the vast majority of people, if they have access to these resources, will in fact use it in a constructive way. And I believe the evidence also really bears that out. But also critically in terms of basic income program design, it should always be designed so that at the end of the day, a person is better off if they pursue work, if they can, if they want to. And if they don't, then basic income should at least be sufficient to allow for basic needs to be covered. It's not meant to be high enough for people to take vacations to Hawaii or play golf for the rest of their life. It's really meant to just provide a better floor for people, more security, and hopefully people's basic needs, perhaps tied to something like the market basket measure as a measure of poverty. Maybe that's the figure that we always strive for. At the maximum, that would be what would be available. There'll always be individual circumstances that have to be attended to with other supports. So basic income is not a panacea. It's not meant to be a one and only, and it's not meant to replace a whole bunch of other supports in our society. But it can replace some income security programs which are inadequate, ineffective, and also very much retard work, like Ontario Works and ODA. Well, Ontario Works, the low level of resources made available, that almost makes it impossible, I think, for many people to actually engage in work, because you probably can't afford you can't afford a car, you can't get around, you're not eating properly because your nutrition is poor, so your health is suffering. How can people with such poor support actually be expected to pursue and hold on to work? So the design of the program, I think, is very important, and it can be done in such a way to always try to ensure that people are going to be better off if they pursue work. But again, if they aren't able to or can't for whatever reason, they can at least have a roof over their head and half decent food in their kitchen. The other thing is with regard to municipal resolutions, Sean, I will send you a few examples, recent examples from Ontario and how those were crafted. All the ones I've seen so far begin with a series of whereases that sort of reiterate the conditions in that particular community, the inadequacy of existing programs. Many municipalities have called on the province to immediately increase the rates of social assistance, but also for the federal and provincial governments to engage in a serious examination of basic income. They're kind of along those lines, so I'll send you a few examples of those.
Excellent.
And I'm happy to help in whatever way I can as you move your processes forward. Yeah.
We also, I mentioned a delegation earlier at the municipal conference in January. We're also seeing a delegation with Mr. Parsa about OTSB rates. So we'll see what happens.
Good.
Questions, comments?
So does it fall under, because it says universal, what's the title? Universal basic income?
Mm-hmm.
Does it fall under federal government or provincial government?
It would, my own view is that it should be a federal program, but coordinated very closely with and have provincial buy-in. Because in my view, a basic income for adults aged 18 to 64 should replace Ontario Works and largely replace ODSP. But for persons with disabilities, there always needs to be, in my view, there needs to be additional supports for persons with disabilities. And there are proposals out there for what that could look like. The Parliamentary Budget Office has done some costing on a national basic income program modeled on the Ontario pilot project, which provided a basic income for adults aged 18 to 64, but also some additional money for persons with disabilities. So, yeah, but I think it needs to be federal, and the federal government has lots of experience in running big programs like this. So the machinery to make this happen is kind of in place, but the policy and the legislation to give it authorization is not yet there.
So you are now bridging with the MPs or the Senate, as I heard, to make it like a...
Yeah, we at LBIN haven't yet engaged our member of parliament on this, Scott Reid. That's definitely on our radar. We do have our meeting with MPP Jordan on January the 15th as our first interaction with him on this. We've actually heard from one of our members that apparently John Jordan is supportive of basic income. So if he is, then we want to drill in a bit more about what that what that means and whether or not he feels he's got some room to carry some discussion forward within his caucus, because of course his government killed the Ontario pilot project, but we've seen the Ontario government kind of change course on a few issues, in recent months, or where they were going one direction and they, oh no, I guess we better not do that. So I'm hopeful that they might say, yeah, you know what, we should take another look at this.
Any further? Rob, thanks again. Very valued presentation.
It's welcome.
Very deeply meaningful.
Could I ask maybe Carrie if you could just send me the list of the committee members?
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Yeah.
I think we'll bring back the resolution at the examples you bring. We'll bring that forward to our next meeting.
Yeah. And I should just clarify too, I'm speaking on behalf of LBIN in part because I have not yet brought this to my own council. And I've been advised actually by our integrity commissioner. Every municipality has an integrity commissioner, that because I'm involved with LBIN, I have to recuse myself if and when basic income comes up before the Tay Valley Township Council, which is fine. So other members of LBIN can make that presentation to my council and I'll step out of the room. But if or when my council says, yep, we're totally supportive and we want our Reeve to champion this, then I'll be able to wear my Reeves hat and champion it. So I'm kind of walking a bit of a fine line with this, but thank you very much for the opportunity and wish you well with the rest of your meeting. And
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
pass those out.
Yeah. Okay, so moving forward with our agenda and respecting, I knew our delegations would take more time today and very appropriate that they did. So I don't think we're going to get through the agenda today, but so I'm going to skip priority issue A, strategic priorities vision. I think we need more time to do a true effective discussion on that. So we'll defer that to our next meeting. And we will make that more, we don't have a lot else that means you'll talk about then. Update on the working group meeting. And Carrie, did everyone receive the email? regarding the notes of the working group?
No, I just sent them to you. If you don't have them, Sean, do you want me to?
No, we didn't.
Okay, you may go to me and, okay. So you don't mind just going through those?
Certainly.
So Katie and Mitra and I met a few weeks ago, I guess, to discuss the development of an ambassador allyship program.
I guess was that second?
Was it?
Last.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember the date. But it carries much touches the highlights. We were of the discussion we had this so far. There's a couple of outcomes from that, and we've got some feedback also related to some of the discussion we had and the work that's happened since then.
So we met on November 22nd. And it's opening.
Yes, that's right. Subcommittee, yeah. Second husband.
Must have been.
So there was Mayor Panko, Mitra, and Katie in attendance. So of course we opened up, and the mayor reiterated that the whole point is that we want to attract newcomers to settle and be comfortable and confident here. And then we discussed about some type of program that could be developed to recruit newcomers to Smiths Falls and people that act as ambassadors. And that they'd like to see part of the town's website more dedicated towards immigration and newcomers to Smiths Falls. It talked about adding a couple more people to the group who are from Smiths Falls to discuss the challenges they faced and developed a program that covers all the bases. So people that are new to Smiths Falls but are now currently residents, and talk to them to see what issues they had. Some ideas that came forward were having like a breakfast or a coffee session with the mayor where they could speak to him about challenges they're facing. Maybe an event for newcomers to the community where the mayor is available and they can speak openly to Mayor Panko. We could arrange transportation as well. We spoke about and heard today that transportation, it can be an issue for many people. Talked about possibly doing a SWOT analysis and discuss the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for newcomers to Smiths Falls. And then we talked about needing to think about the needs of families, both short-term and long-term, maybe possibly getting partnerships with the DBA and Chamber of Commerce. Need to think about things like doctors, healthcare in general, simple things like knowing where grocery stores are and things like that. That's where the ambassador program came into play. A point that Mitra brought up, which was I hadn't thought of, was the need to bring somebody in who can translate, because not all people who come to Smiths Falls are going to be able to speak English. And then so it talked about the association that this group could have with something like the Welcome Wagon, which I don't think exists anymore. Because they used to bring baskets to new mothers and new people with coupons and things from town and introduce them to different people and different businesses in town. And then spoke about being able to get things to people, donated items like furniture and clothing, and looking to see if there'd be agencies in Smiths Falls who would be able to store or be able to take these items to people in need. Like pick them up from the people who are donating and then drop them off to people who need them. Not just people new to people people new to Smiths Falls, but also seniors or single parents who find it difficult to leave home. Again, spoke about the huge barrier that transportation is for people who need to get into the city. Daycare is something that we'd have to look on, and Mitra again brought up a good point that right now the daycare is pretty much during the daytime, but a lot of people who are newcomers or working outside of Smiths Falls are probably working shifts, so there needs to be some availability of daycare in late afternoons and evenings. Also, we talked about the Lanark and Renfrew County Immigration Partnership and the need to find out exactly what they do so that we're not duplicating efforts. And as a note, I did reach out to them, but I haven't heard back because Mayor Panko and I both think that it'd be a great resource for this community or for this group to hear what they do so that we can complement each other and not duplicate efforts. Of course, spoke about housing, about affordability of housing and the issue of transitioning from renting to owning a home for newcomers, and about how the town can play a part in that, about affordable housing. And I think that was about it, Sean.
Yeah.
I think that covered everything.
Yeah, so will be a follow-up with the local immigration partnership for Lanark and Renfrew counties, and hopefully their staff, Jody Nichols, or one of their staff can come at maybe our next meeting or come soon. We have our economic development and tourism department also has produced a welcome guide, and I think I've got a paper copy. I think there's an electronic copy online. Carrie, you can circulate that to everybody. So it does provide some list of details and resources that are out there to form part of what we're trying to do. But so I think that the steps forward, our next step forward is to try to do some outreach into the community in order to get some participation from people who are fairly new to the community to get their understanding on how we can best move forward. So the other thing I want to mention, January 14th from noon to 4, the Memorial Community Center upstairs, I'm hosting sort of the annual Mayor's Levy, but I tied into the Ukrainian New Year. And we did it last year and I did it before the pandemic. And it's an opportunity for the community to come out. We'll try to promote it and hopefully welcome in a lot of people who are fairly new to our community. And that might be a forum even to connect with people who have moved here in recent times and maybe want to help provide some guidance to us as well. But everyone's welcome for that. The Great Ukrainian Feast. And that's it this Sunday. Sunday, yeah. And just public skating too, as well, for those who want to do skates on. I don't know what people love. Your kids will. Right, so there's a lot of work to do here, but we want to make sure, as Carrie said, not duplicating what the LIC is doing. But at the same time, the LIC has got one staff member right now. They have one more coming, but they're covering 2 camps. So we want to make sure we can do what we can here. And I don't know if either one of you have anything to add to that? To the experience we had when we met on the 22nd?
Oh, I have a full list of things that I want to bring forward.
Okay.
I've been driving. Something like that, and I would talk to my phone. Send this to me so that I keep it in my mind for our discussion.
Okay, perfect.
So I have a list that I'm going to.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Okay, so a lot more work to do there anyway. And sorry, I will also I failed earlier to start the meeting to welcome Sean Kilgan, who's our community service officer for the Smiths Falls Police Service. And I think we talked before about having a member of the service here. So Sean's not, I guess, officially here yet, but you are unofficially part of our committee, and it's great to have you here. We know our police service interacts with everybody in our community, and Sean more so than the rest, certainly from public education standpoint and connecting. So I'll give you a moment just for you all to talk a little bit about the work that you do.
So I guess technically speaking, I'm supposed to be the link between the police service and the community, whether that be the schools, the businesses, different working groups and what have you. So I do presentations in the schools. I attend and serve lunches on Mondays at Hanley Hall. I'm in the schools on a regular basis dealing with different issues that they wouldn't necessarily want to escalate to the police service, but that they want police guidance on. I work with Family and Children's Services. I work with the SADV clinic, the hospital. I'm on all kinds of different chairs, committees, and boards regarding. One is We have filter for meetings that stem from our community group meetings that look at collaborative efforts to provide supports to people that are in crisis. So whether that's an individual or a family, and it can range from financial to mental health and everything in between. Some of it is domestic violence, some of it is human trafficking or victims of or targets of. So I mean, it kind of runs the gamut of what we do. I wear a lot of different hats. If the police service finds that there is something that is missed or needed, I get tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, Sean, we need you to go do this. So I get to work collaboratively with the fire department and town hall on different targeted events and projects as well. So I get to do it all. Some of the best part of it is in the warmer season, I'm out on the bike and I'm visible in the community because the public, for myself anyway, find that we're more approachable. We're either out on foot or out on the bike patrol, and so I get to hear and talk with the people that are permanent residents in our community as well as tourists, especially in the boating season and the camping season, what have you. So you get to do it all.
Yeah, great, now you're part of the group. Okay, and so on that sort of item C is the updated terms of reference for inclusion of 2 youth, and so we will also be looking to recruit 2 youth members for this committee that was approved by council. I think it's very important that we have their voice at the table as well.
I worked with the equity and diversity principal. We met him last year. I can probably reach out to him and see he
Yes.
might suggest or recommend, or see if he's able to spare some time to join some of our future meetings as well.
Sounds good. Perfect. Okay.
Mayor Campbell, can I just add to that, if you don't mind? The ad is out for the youth members for this group. I sent it out yesterday. You may see it on social media. It closes mid-January, and I've also sent it to SFDCI, hoping that the teachers will circulate that. So as we discussed, it'd be ages 16 to 17. So hopefully we get some uptake. And I was really happy to hear John speak earlier about having youth as well involved in Planet Youth, which and on Monday night, council also heard a presentation from 2 other groups within the town, one being Climate Action and one being the Municipal Heritage Committee. And their terms of reference are being amended this Monday evening, coming to include youth membership as well. So it's, I'm going to say we started that trend. We totally started that trend.
We'll start here, right?
So we're hopefully we can engage a lot of youth on the committees and get their perspective. So fingers crossed that we get some applications for this group anyway.
Super. Thank you. So I guess we ran a little bit longer than we anticipated today, but that's fine. It was a very valuable meeting, some great presentations. Next meeting date is January 11th. Is that the calendars?
Excuse myself from that day, that's my birthday.
Your birthday.
Yes.
Carrie's gonna bring cake, I guess.
The next meeting?
Pardon?
The next meeting's your birthday?
Yes,
Duly
definitely.
noted, Deidre.
Okay.
Drop my regrets from now.
I'll try not to sing. I don't want that. Okay. Ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Peter, second by Major. All in favor? Thanks, everybody.